Hi, I'm Amanda McKay. I'm a professional artist and I'm making these videos to give tips to help enhance your creativity regardless of your level of expertise. So whether you've been working at some creative practice for a long time or maybe you're just starting out, either way, these tips are going to be useful for everybody. One thing that I think most people who seem to be naturally creative have in common is that they never really completely left their childhood behind, for better or for worse. Obviously, there can be some drawbacks to this, but because creativity is our natural state, being able to easily access the way it felt to be a child is very helpful. Just think of the way that children play and all the creative scenarios they can come up with, and how some object can represent something completely different. Like where people would use a stick and pretend it's a gun and play cops and robbers, that kind of thing. So children are very naturally creative. But beyond that, there was probably an age where you didn't really care too much what other people thought of you. Hopefully, you had a decent enough childhood where you had some age, maybe it was up until age 4 or 5, but you believed in yourself and you thought you were awesome, and you believed that one day you could do anything, you could be anything that you wanted. And let's say you were 4 years old and you were wearing a shirt that you liked. If some other 4-year-old came up and told you that the shirt was dumb, how much would you really care? Now, by the time you're 14, if somebody told you your shirt was dumb, that might have been devastating to you. But can you remember a time where any kind of criticism like that just would roll off your back? Again, you probably didn't want to get in trouble with your parents or anything like that. But as far as, if you thought that bugs were cool like I did, you didn't really care if anybody else disagreed or thought that that was dumb. Or that you were dumb because you liked something like that they didn't think was good enough. So that's the kind of headspace that I'm hoping that you can get into. And if you really did have a rough childhood, this might be something to explore with a therapist. But the more that you can kind of get that feeling, I guess I would describe it as almost a feeling of invincibility that you probably had from some time or other as a child. And that would, of course, it's interesting because children are also very small and helpless in a lot of ways. So it's always interesting to me that there's kind of this, that it almost conflicts with rationality. And maybe it's because the kids haven't reached the age of reason yet. But, that a 5-year-old often just feels invincible and almost like they could fly and be Superman if they tried hard enough. So can you somehow channel that space, that headspace, and get into that frame of mind? Because again, the person who seems to be naturally creative probably never really let go of that feeling completely and can sort of conjure it up. Now, if you've just left this feeling in the dust a long time ago, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for you to get back into that headspace. But I'd like for you to try. Can you think, this is how you can do it, can you think of something like a hobby or something creative that you really enjoyed when you were very, very young? And maybe it's something that you can't really do anymore. Like maybe you loved riding your bike, and maybe you don't even have a bike and wouldn't be able to ride one now anyway because of some kind of physical limitation. But is there something, maybe an interest that you enjoyed? Maybe you really like turtles or something. Could you just just pick up a book about turtles and try to get back into how you felt when that was something that you really, really liked and were maybe even obsessed with? One thing that I think would work for almost anybody, if you can't come up with anything, or maybe you don't really remember much before the age of 10, well, one thing that I would recommend then is getting some crayons and some paper. And, maybe you want to do a coloring book, or maybe you just want to scribble with some crayons on a piece of paper. But I think almost everybody, that was something that they did in childhood, and almost everybody probably enjoyed that. And if you were young enough, you just were drawing, you know, maybe you were drawing your family and a house, and then like a sun in the corner of the, you know, in the upper right corner with rays coming out. A lot of kids that are the same age tend to draw kind of the same thing. But you probably, when you were young enough, you drew something like that and you didn't really worry how good it was. You didn't care. And most likely, you know, if you were 4 years old, the other 4-year-olds probably weren't wasting their time judging you. They were too busy drawing their own drawing. So that's what I recommend if you're really having trouble accessing your inner child. And again, if actually drawing something from scratch doesn't appeal to you, then get a page from a coloring book. I would say to probably stay away from the really advanced, elaborate coloring books for adults and get something that's a bit simpler. But give it a try and see if that works for you, and if it, you know, and if it does need to be a more elaborate coloring book made for grown-ups, that's fine too. But just something where you can, even for just a few minutes, just try to channel what it felt like back before you really cared what anybody thought of you, and you weren't worried about criticism, whether from yourself or from other people. And on the topic of criticism specifically, I have done 2 previous videos, one about criticism from other people and one about self-criticism. And if this is something that you're really struggling with right now, I would recommend going back and looking at those videos. But hopefully you can remember a time and remember what it felt like, where there was just this kind of invincibility and you had your whole life ahead of you and you could be anything that you wanted to be. So try this out, and let me know in the comments if you're successful at basically getting back into this headspace, even for just a minute or two. And I would love to know if you're able to do this, and how well it works. And it is something that really will help you with creativity, even if you're not actually creating something while you're in this headspace. Like I said, if you were the person who loved turtles, okay, maybe you're not being creative if you're looking at pictures of turtles, but it is still kind of getting you back into that sort of mindset that you had a long time ago, that will make it easier for you to be creative with your actual creative practice and whatever hobby or form of art you like to work in. So I hope this video was useful to you. Again, let me know in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe. And again, my name is Manda McKay, and thank you so much for watching.